going to do this. Sorry about that. So, hi, my name is Bridget Kromhout, and you've gotten plenty of time to look at my title slide. So, we will move on if... Oh, come on. This does actually work. It worked in my hotel room. Yeah, no. Everything hates me. That's okay. I really don't want to talk into this thing. Yeah, my name is Bridget Kromhout, and I'm here talking to you because I've done a number of these, and everything is cut off. I'm going to try to be calm about that. So I've been a sysadmin for a good long while, and I also, this is not going to work. I can hear that. Can I stand over here? Does that work? All right, we'll do that. Sorry, as a short individual, I really, really hate standing behind podiums because I feel like all you can see is a tiny floating head. So, in any case, so this whole DevOps thing is something that I've been dealing with for the, doing stuff with for the last year and a half or so. And after DevOpsDays Minneapolis, we got some interesting feedback from first-time attendees. Now, I was sitting with my back to the room when that question was answered. Can anyone raise your hand if this is your first DevOps Days? Hey, look at that. This is awesome. You're my audience. So if this is your first DevOps Days, you're probably thinking, first of all, wow, these people are not audiovisual professionals. That one is quite obvious. If my partner Joe is watching on the live stream from Minneapolis, he is an audiovisual professional. That's what's so ironic about this. I'm plagued by audiovisual problems whenever he's not there. But anyway, in Minneapolis, where Joe ran our audiovisual, I had some really interesting feedback from first-time attendees. And it was one person in particular, and we got some feedback on our survey, but I also had one gentleman in particular come and talk to me in person at lunch the second day. And he said, is it okay if I give you some feedback? And it actually reminded me of this wonderful video that Daniel Beauchamp put up. He played a video about feedback at Monitorama in Portland this spring during his dashing tutorial. And that was really fantastic. And I'll have links to all this stuff later and tweet about it, so you can go watch his video because it's really funny. But one of the things that the video talked about is how feedback is a gift. And you need to ask people if it's okay for you to give them feedback. And then when you do give them feedback, and then they're listening to it, they should be taking it in the spirit it's intended. And so one thing that we heard was that some attendees felt like they were on the outside of this DevOps thing looking in. And we had this exciting pink-haired thought leadership conspiracy of hipster DevOps or whatever the hell. And people felt like they weren't included in that. And then another thing that some people, even after the fact, some people who I knew who I'd worked with in the past and whatnot told me, is that they felt like they didn't necessarily get enough that they thought was actionable, like something that they could take back to their offices and start doing right away. And I thought those are both really interesting and valuable, and so I'm really grateful to Chicago for having me come and talk to you about some of these ways that we can actually solve these issues, I think. And I think that we actually, caused these somewhat, and we can solve them. So part of it is, this whole DevOps thing. Because we're cut off a little bit on the side, the one thing that's cut off everywhere is drama fever. So if you can't see that, I kind of glossed over that I'm an operations engineer. I work for a company called Drama Fever. We're a streaming video site. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But anyway, on this whole DevOps thing, if we're just throwing a bunch of acronyms and buzzwords around, and you see this all in like marketing materials and in recruiter spam that you're getting constantly, you might wonder, like, what does this stuff even really mean? And when you come to one of these conferences, and a lot of the speakers who have maybe been to a couple of these will start talking in acronyms and buzzwords, and you'll wonder what some of this stuff is. And I think some of that, at least that's feedback that I got from attendees in Minneapolis, made them feel a little bit outside and alienated if they didn't even know what people were talking about. So I'll just give you a cheat sheet of some of the jargon, and unfortunately some of that is cut off, so I'll read some of it to you. Yes, Michael, I see you laughing there. You'll hear people talking about unicorns and horses. And the whole unicorns and horses thing is just this idea of a unicorn being a super special secret company that's awesome and magical and can somehow do everything perfectly. And horses, on the other hand, being all of the normal companies that most people work for that aren't magical and have, processes and technical debt and all sorts of things. Then there's talk about silos and goats and owls and a whole bunch of farm animals and what's going on with that. There's actually the silo thing is just this idea of everything being separate from each other. So if you work in an organization where development does one thing and then operations, they throw it over the wall and it worked in DevOps problem now, little girl setting everything on fire. That is, it's a metaphor. It's not entirely perfect. Kevin Bear, who is somebody who writes and talks in this space, has mentioned that silos actually, are permeable. I mean, if we're talking about like respiratory permeability, you can get, things in and out of silos. They aren't entirely, they're not like, unless you're talking missile silos. But anyway, Michael actually did this, this idea of a goat possibly tethered to a silo that can go visit other silos, get ideas, and come back. And when he spoke at Warsaw, they actually gave him a speaker gift that was a statue of a goat, which I think is hilarious. But he also had a talk in Brisbane where he talked about maybe what we need, maybe the animal mascot that we need is like a wise owl that listens instead of talking. I'm saying this talking to you, but I want to listen to you a little later. That's what open space is for. Also, people may talk about thought leadership. That's pretty much nonsense. You should ignore that. If you're here and you're thinking and you're going to go back to your organization and use these ideas, you're thought leaders, or none of us are, whatever. Let's see, there's lots of jokes about everything as a service. Obviously, you've heard everything about like infrastructure as a service and software as a service and platform as a service. You might hear people talking about, I don't know, sadness as a service if they've spent any time with EBS, or storage in the cloud in general. And there's a lot of talk also of CAMs and different variations of that, like culture, automation, measurement, and sharing. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here too. All right, let's see. Okay, so I have to have the obligatory Pete Cheslock tweet because you have to have the obligatory Pete Cheslock tweet. And if you're thinking, well, who the hell is that? Just someone on Twitter, you can follow him, he's funny. But he points out that there's a lot of silly marketing speak around DevOps and titles. And yeah, it's true, but you're not doing it wrong if you have that in your group name or in your title. Because, well, first of all, you probably didn't pick that name. And second of all, if we're going around judging each other by whether or not we have the right title, we're doing it wrong. So don't worry about that. Even though people may laugh at that, yeah, it does kind of sound ridiculous. Hey, I'm a DevOps engineer. Really? I'm an agile engineer. What? Okay, but don't worry about it too much. It's probably fine. You probably can't see that at all. That's okay. The slides will look really pretty online. And if you're thinking at this point, okay, there's magical unicorns and also something about goats, and I'm kind of just terrified by this whole thing because maybe I don't belong here. Don't worry about that. If you're here, if you're in this room at this time, you are the right person. You're in the right place. You do belong here. It is okay. You're not going to do DevOps Days wrong. So I'm apparently doing DevOps Days wrong because I picked don't change the aspect ratio on my slides and didn't think about how much I had on the far left. So that's okay. But some of the things you want to do, the hallway track, even at a single track conference like this, super important. Just go out there and talk to people. You could be watching a live stream. You can be watching videos later. You can be looking at slides online. You can be reading blog posts. Those are all things that you can do by yourself later. So talking to people while you're here is super important. Looking at Twitter, the hashtag DevOpsDays is pretty valuable. And if you're thinking right now, well, I don't actually use Twitter because social media, shrug. I did feel that way. A former boss of mine actually convinced me to make a Twitter account before I went to Velocity Santa Clara in 2013. And that was a fantastic decision. I'm super glad I did because all of these, awesome people that you meet here today, if you don't want them to be Fight Club style single-serving friends, you're going to want some way to stay in touch with them. And Twitter is probably, the de facto way to get that done. The whole thing before about stuff being actionable, some of the people who told me that also are people who skipped open space in the afternoon. And a lot of the talks in the morning are going to be culture talks. And in open space, you'll have that long talk about, Elasticsearch and, oh God, why does it take up so much disk? I'm going to definitely want to talk to you about that later. Because that was my week. open space is where you're going to have those conversations. Then you're thinking to yourself, how many people who are here, raise your hand if you actually are going to be commuting home tonight. You live in Chicago. Yeah. So you're thinking, do I really want to go to this evening event? I mean, maybe it'll be okay, but I have stuff to do at home. And this is a work thing, and should work really extend to after work? In this case, make an exception. You should this is not just yet another happy hour with your coworkers. You should definitely go, because this is a way that you have a chance to speak more with and bond with all of the people who you're meeting here. And again, you came here to meet people, because the talks are all well and good, but I'm one person that you're hearing stuff from, and you're barely even talking back. You could be talking back, Ducey. You're not even saying anything. And if you already know some people here, excellent. Then your job is to talk to the new people. And if you feel like, but I am the new people, who should I be talking to? You should be talking to all of the other people next to you. Like, this stuff is, I'm spending time on this because this is actually really important. This is how you optimize your experience. At Velocity New York, Anil Lakhani had this really, really good Ignite. You should all go watch it. I'll have a link to it later. But it was on the whole topic of, the somewhat contentious enterprise DevOps and the idea of unicorns and naming people in such a way as to set them apart. I think his talk was called Unicorns in the Language of Otherness or something. Point being, if you're saying somebody, some company, some organization, or some person is so different from me that I can't possibly be like them, the fact that they're different from you means that you have something that you can learn from them. And they probably have something they can learn from you. So when you say, well, these people, they work for Chef, they work for Elasticsearch, they work for some streaming video company I've never heard of. How can my company, which is, a giant ponderous beast, be anything like them? That's probably not the case. You probably have a lot that you can do that's exactly what these people are doing. So, and if you're wondering, again, what Drama Fever is, so we're a streaming video site. We stream K-dramas, J-dramas, telenovelas, some Taiwanese dramas. And we've been around for about 5 years. I've been there about 2 months, which means I walked into a situation where there was a lot of stuff had already happened and already been done and was pretty awesome. And there was other stuff that was not the way I was used to it being. So we have a lot of Docker. Like we're actually using it in production. We're using it for pretty much everything. We containerize something before we put it out there. And yes, if you're wondering what the great deal of Docker there is, again, Michael Ducey, go take a look at his, what was that talk called, Ducey? The Future of Everything? Yeah, the future of everything, Docker. And so, yeah, I was like, fantastic. I have this exciting new job. I get to use the new hotness. Everything is shiny. Everything is cool. Oh, we don't have any config management. That's fantastic. So this week, aside from conference stuff, the first thing on my to-do list is setting up some config management. And so again, I mean, you might look at a company that is using Docker in production for everything and think, oh, I could never even teach them anything because obviously they're so far ahead of us. And you see now there's so many different axes that you can be on in this journey and I'm showing you this about us just to show you that, like, no one has this all figured out and done. And the other thing about wanting actionable takeaways, if people were going to come to a conference and get a checklist of how they should do the DevOps, and then take that back to their office, and then just check off every item on the checklist, and then they have the DevOps, that sounds ideal, except it's ridiculous and could never happen. Instead, you got to think, like, instead of wanting an actionable list of things to do, think about you're going to come to this and learn a lot of different stuff, and then you'll decide in the context of your environment what the right things are for you to do. Some of them may be actual tools or techniques that are shown here today. Some of them may not be. It's probably fine. And this is a little cut off. So I've got to give you some quotes from John Vincent, because here's your obligatory bleeping section of the talks. But John Vincent had a blog post a while ago, but it's worth looking at, even though it's been around for a bit. And it's just like, DevOps is pretty simple, all right? DevOps means giving a shit about your job enough not to pass the buck, all right? DevOps means giving a shit about your job enough to want to learn all the parts and not just your little world. And that means a lot to me, I think, because when I am working as an operations engineer, you might think like, well, I'm not going to give a crap about Angular. Why would I care about Angular? That's a front-end thing. But you know what? I do need to care about it if I'm going to Dockerize it, right? If I'm going to set up a container that will actually have a Docker file that will install all the correct dependencies and make Angular work, or if I'm going to set up Docker to run all of our Selenium tests, oh, now I have to deal with like Phantom.js. I have to deal with headless browser stuff. So, and I have to learn from our QA people or from our front-end people exactly how they want the stuff set up. If I'm going to be operating, in conjunction with my coworkers, that is something I do need to care about and pay attention to. Am I ever going to be an expert in Angular? It's unlikely. But, who knows, right? But I do have to care about it because it's something that my coworkers care about. And then the quote continues, the developers need to understand infrastructure, operations people need to understand code, people need to fucking work with each other and not just occupy space next to each other. And if you've worked at a company where people maybe just occupy space next to you, and maybe you've even felt that way sometimes yourself, I know I've felt that way in the past. Well, first of all, you should pull a Nathan Harvey and quit your job. But but seriously, if you want to improve that space, the best way you can do that is to be the person who cares. Because if you are the person who cares, it is infectious. Because this stuff is something we work on on an individual basis. But also, Andrew Clay Schaefer has a really good talk from, I think it was Velocity New York 2013 that you can go watch, where he talks about learning organizations. And he says that we're in a totally different game than where we were when we started. Looking around this room, I see some people maybe as old as I am. Some people in this room possibly are still mad about Solaris because they liked SunOS 4.1.3. I see some heads nodding. And so, like, you think, you've been in this industry, if you've been playing this game for a while, and you think things are going to be mostly the way they were, I got news for you. Andrew's quote is correct. The game has changed. Everything is moving faster now. Everything is different, which is okay, and it's more fun, actually, and it's pretty awesome. But it does mean that if you're, a curmudgeonly sysadmin like I used to be, you should probably think about getting on this DevOps bandwagon in terms of change. And that kind of brings us to the whole organizational learning thing, kind of brings us to our sponsors. So we have all sorts of sponsors here, which is fantastic. A lot of them sell tools and or services that are very useful to us working in this DevOps space. I think, was it Cheslock who said something about how the only DevOps tool is the person who calls himself director of DevOps? Who was it who said that? Nathan Harvey said that. Fantastic. Nice. Right, that's why I was thinking of Cheslock. Okay, so Nathan Harvey said that. The only DevOps tool is the person who calls himself the director of DevOps. So sorry, sponsors, if you're saying that you're selling DevOps tools, you're not. All right, you're selling automation tools. You're selling, infrastructure orchestration tools, support for said tools. But DevOps is not something that you're going to buy and get in a box. And if you haven't watched this video from our friends at ScriptRock, it's actually really funny. They have a DevOps in a box video. It's musical. It's hilarious. But no one is going to sell you this. Well, I mean, I'm sure there are going to be people who would like to sell you this, but it's bullshit. There is no DevOps in a box. So you can't actually buy it because it doesn't exist. And so then you're kind of wondering, well, wait a minute, like, what are all of these tools? What are all these sponsors doing? They're our collaborators. They're our partners in this space, right? Anyone who's doing anything commercial in this space, and it's useful and helpful to those of us who are trying to use those tools, fantastic. The sponsor is not the enemy, right? But if you must be wary of someone saying that they're going to give you a fully turnkey enterprise-grade DevOps solution, because that's nonsense. And this is cut off as well, but I said this on Twitter, and I was it was sort of hyperbole, but I said DevOps is culture Twitterverse. Anyone who says differently is selling something. And this is not entirely right because it's reductionist and simplistic, because DevOps is not just culture, right? I mean, obviously there's also, as John Willis puts it, automation and measurement and sharing and all of those things. I think that culture is where you need to start, though, because again, this is back to the people wanted something actionable. Well, I mean, yeah, sure, go install Chef. That'll be what I'm doing later this week, whatever. That is a thing that you can do that's on a checklist, but that doesn't make everyone else in the organization want to use it. That doesn't make people want to share information. Like, that's something that you need to actually talk to each other and give a crap about. And this picture is cut off too, unfortunately, but at DevOps Days Minneapolis, Catherine Daniels, who now works for Etsy actually, but she didn't at the time, she's talking about empathy, empathy is that bridge between the competing worlds of developers and operations. If you're tasked with stability and your person across the aisle is tasked with new features, there is a natural tension there. There's a natural break-fix sort of tension. But empathy is where you actually care about what the other person is trying to accomplish. We're going to have some kind of DevOpsception here because I have a slide that's a screen cap from Tim O'Reilly's keynote from Velocity New York, where he's actually quoting Jeff Sussna's blog post. Jeff Sussna was actually one of our speakers at DevOps Days Minneapolis, so it was really kind of exciting to see him suddenly up on the big screen at Velocity New York this fall. And you can read it later, but it's basically just saying the true essence of DevOps is empathy. It's where you actually give a shit. So DevOps is giving a shit. All right. And this is a little cut off too, but Courtney Nash actually said, try the exercise of replacing every instance you see of DevOps with empathy and see what happens. And Jeff Sussna said, our empathy team bought a new enterprise empathy automation tool. That works nicely. Yeah, no, right? So if you think about it in those terms, you'll realize that you don't use a tool to make yourself and your coworkers give a shit about meeting the organization's goals, right? You want your incentives to be aligned such that you're all working towards the same goals. I mean, in the past, I've been in that IT shop where, hey, as long as we're closing tickets, everything is fine. Well, it doesn't matter whether or not the end user is happy, but we close the ticket. And if you've been in those kind of environments, your incentives are not set up to make sure that people are actually going to end up accomplishing anything. So, I mean, again, going back to, as long as you actually care about your coworkers, this is how you solve this. So this is the slide, which you probably can't really see, but this is actually the trivia game that we played at DevOps Days Minneapolis and the post-DevOps Sparkly Princesses. I was not actually on this team. I'm not a Sparkly DevOps Princess, but a bunch of Team Etsy was on this team and ended up not being able to name any of the O'Reilly book animals. I guess Ben and Catherine are not good at animals, is what they said on Twitter later. But the idea being that we actually had this trivia game, and the prizes were things like tickets to Velocity New York and tickets to ChefConf. And the people who won were not your hipster DevOps, pink-haired thought leader, conspiracy people, whatever you want to call it. It was actually completely, had never gone to any DevOps event before, people who just happened to live in Minneapolis, who were like the most iconic platonic form of J-random attendee, are actually the ones who walked away with all the big prizes and I think had a fantastic time. Because it turns out, like, there is no exciting inner circle. There's just friends that you've already met and friends that you haven't met yet. So I'm really excited to meet all of the DevOps friends here because, that'll be pretty great. And on the enterprise DevOps thing, there's been a lot of back and forth on Twitter about it, and I would just point you back to Anil's excellent Ignite, where he points out that labeling, or Ducey is tweeting. He's not paying any attention to me. It's terrible. Labeling DevOps hurts the movement, is what is. Yeah, exactly. If you label me, you negate me. Labeling DevOps hurts the movement. It really does, because if you try to say, well, this is the retail DevOps, and this is the enterprise DevOps, and this is the small e-com DevOps, and this is the 37th floor where we don't have LTE DevOps. This is, if we just go back to DevOps is giving a shit and cooperating with each other, you don't need all of those, forks. You don't need to fork the DevOps movement. It's just DevOps. It's okay. It's probably fine. And no one is going to, you're not going to be able to buy it. So if people try to sell it to you, you should ignore that because that's clearly silly. And it's possible that they're motivated by things other than your organization's well-being. So, so thanks, Chicago. This is the Minneapolis team. Some of the people in this room are in this picture. I think coming up right after me, and I've run long, I'm sure, but coming up right after, tried to keep it short, but you know. But Andy, I think, is up right after me, and was on our team Minneapolis, and Tom Duffield is also going to be speaking to us a little later here. And mostly, I just wanted to say thank you for inviting Minneapolis folks in to chat with you, because I got to say, sometimes Chicago seems like this, you know, giant powerhouse of the Midwest, and Minneapolis is just this tiny dot on the map. But it was really exciting and gratifying and kind of humbling to actually be able to give some of the learnings, some of the, you know, I don't know, 7,000 words or so, 14 pages in Google Docs that I wrote about all of the things that we learned that we wish that we had done differently. And some of that was helpful for Chicago, so yay. But anyway, so I guess if you're going to just take something away from this, take that you should not worry about whether you're doing DevOps right. You're here, so you're obviously doing it right. And you should not worry about whether or not you bought the right thing or made the right checklist. That stuff will work itself out. You're just here to get to know the people in your community who are actually pretty awesome. And since the show of hands showed that most of you live in Chicago, most of you are going to get a chance to see each other again, hopefully at meetups, etc. And I'm pretty excited about that. And I really am happy to be here today. And I don't think we probably have much, if any, time for questions, but I just wanted to say thank you. So thanks.